Today's episode is presented by Lodestar, the fee experts.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Lodestar's Lending Leaders. My name is Alayna Gardner, and this week I'm joined with Monica Raciti. She is the head of partnerships at Vesta. And thank you so much, Monica, for joining me today.
Thanks so much for having me, Alayna. I've been looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. So we always like to start off with a little bit of how you got into mortgage and how you ended up here.
Yeah, when I was 5 years old, I dreamed of being in mortgage, and ended up here today. But no, actually, I'm not sure. I was
Said no one ever.
Not on my bingo card. That at this juncture in my career, I would have spent almost, I think, like 7 or 8 years in mortgage at this point, which I know is not a ton compared to some folks in this industry who just get in and don't ever leave. But it was actually interesting. I moved out to California after starting my career in finance out in New York, and when in California, joined a startup. And it just so happened that the first startup I joined was in the mortgage tech space, but more on the servicing side. So I had the opportunity to grow with them, join pretty early on, got to be in corp dev, do chief of staff stuff, finance, etc. And when I was leaving that company, I thought I was going to leave mortgage entirely, and really wanted to go early stage, start up again, kind of start over at the beginning and build another company up. And that's when I met Mike Yu, who's Vesta's CEO. And initially in our first call, he was so funny. I tell this story often. He was like, hey, I don't know what I'm going to do with someone who doesn't know how to code. And I was like, that's cool because I don't think I'm going to stay in mortgage. So like this works out for both of us. That this might not like go much further. But after, many, many conversations, something Mike has the ability to do is make it sound like building mortgage infrastructure is like making art. And I was quite captivated with like how he thought about not solving an incremental problem, which I think happens often in fintech, is you're sort of creating a new UI. So maybe being on old banking infrastructure, whatever it is, which serves a really great purpose, especially on the consumer experience side. But I think to really make the dramatic shifts that, industries, especially ones like mortgage need, you really have to start at the core piece, which for us is building the LOS. So now 3 years into this journey, the team has grown a ton. It's been a really fun ride. And I think mortgage also just has a way of pulling you in. And given how kind and passionate people are about the space, it's really easy to just stay here because it's a really intellectually stimulating problem and a really great place to like work with other folks who care a lot about solving it.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. And, you mentioned briefly that you worked in finance before you came over to the mortgage side. What do you think was the most valuable thing you took away from finance into mortgage? They're related, right? Consumer finance and all that stuff, but not quite, right? As I think is the right way to put it. Like, yes, they're related, but also not at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a great question. And I think like from one's perspective, it was like nice because in finance, I learned a lot just about what it means to build a business. So I was actually working less on the consumer side, even and more like in the area of investment banking. And so really helping companies buy and sell other companies. But I think there were like twofold things. One is that it helped me get into my first job in mortgage because at my last startup, the first thing I worked on was more of a corp dev deal. So helping acquire a small piece of a large company. And the other thing is just like being in the space more broadly. I think you learn about fundamentals of how finance impacts like each person, especially mortgages are a deeply psychological, I think, industry. One thing, which maybe is a hot take, but I think that a lot of how people think about, where they want to buy, what they want to buy is deeply tied to their financial goals. And so I think having a grounding in just thinking about how that all comes together was really helpful in coming to mortgage. And then I think like more on the intersection of finance and technology, we talk a lot at Vesta about helping financial institutions become more technology oriented or become more like technology companies. And really that the future of the industry is that lenders are going to want to differentiate on their technology stack. And so a lot of what we've done at Vesta is really help open up the architecture so that lenders really can build things on top of the workflows that they want, as well as be able to pick kind of the lending stack that makes sense for them. And I'm sure we'll talk more about like our partnership ecosystem generally and, relationship between Lodestar and Vesta. But I think that there's a lot of work there and just sort of at that intersection of finance and technology more generally.
Yeah. And, you've traveled a lot. So when we did our LinkedIn deep dive that we always do, you've been to India, Egypt, you've worked on both coasts, so New York and California. When it comes to working in mortgage, which is a heavily regulated industry and politics very specific to the US, what value have you gained from a more international perspective and getting to be in those places?
Yeah, I definitely value all of the very many twists and turns my career took in my 20s and sort of the opportunities I got to try other places. Working in Cairo was my very first job out of college, and I actually got there by just cold emailing someone, actually the head of an investment firm in Cairo, and said like, "Hey, I'm a college student in the US working in investment management program. I really admire what you're doing and what you're building. Do you have any use for a junior analyst? I'm happy to come work like for cheap,
Hmm.
basically for you." And he was like, "I've never gotten such an email. Sure, like come over and work here." And I think the big thing that all of this experience has taught me is, or there's probably two things that like really stand out for me. One is being comfortable, being uncomfortable. I think that's like
Hmm.
so core to just like success in anything you want to do, is like there is a lot of times where there is just uncomfortability when you're
Hmm.
unsure of like what to do next, and like just becoming comfortable in those periods of time. And then segueing into like more about candidly the partnerships job I do,
Hmm.
is like one thing about working in all these different places, India, um, working in Egypt, working in finance, working kind of just in a bunch of different industries as well, nonprofit, for profit, etc. You learn that like
Hmm.
humans have much more in common than you initially think. And I think having all those experience really contributed to that. And so as I started building out the partnerships ecosystem here at Vesta, something that I just realized is that you can use these experiences of just how do you relate with people, how do you build trust with people quickly. I think which was really important as I just hopped around a bit.
Hmm.
And how important that is for building foundational relationships. And I think that that pairs well, especially in this industry that is so relational. Like mortgage is great in that way of that people are so relational, they're so generous with their time. And I think that that makes a big difference, and that's like a big thing I just like learned from getting to be in all these various cultures.
Yeah, and I really love one of the things I've loved about being in mortgage is I feel like it's this really it feels so big when you first enter it, but it's a small close-knit community where everybody knows everybody. And when I first moved from like a very small hospitality circle, right, is like, okay, I work in Philadelphia hospitality, right? Like I work downtown, all this stuff. It was a pretty like it's a small circle. Yeah, every server knows someone else's servers and all this stuff. There's a lot of drama that happens in restaurants. But I realize it's very similar in the mortgage industry is just that level of partnership building, and you really have to be true to who you are, I think, throughout the process, because you can't not be yourself because eventually someone will find you out, right? Like because it's so relationship based.
100%. I like think that is so true. And it's also that like how do you want to carry out your relationships, right? I think like
Mhm.
being very transparent. We have this value at Vesta. It's called live in reality. And it's about how
Mhm.
like individual honesty promotes your ability to be honest in every interaction that you have, and honest about where things are at, you know, what's going well, where we can grow and be better. And I think that by doing that, you just like promote this understanding that like when you relate with someone that you're both being very honest in that interaction. And I think that
Mhm.
allows you to really better meet your mutual goals as well, because you believe that the other person is like cheering for you, is being candid with you. And without that, it's just like when that trust gets destroyed, I think it's really challenging to accomplish anything, to be honest. And you kind of
Mhm.
create this place where it's more zero sum, where like someone's winning, or there's like what's the hidden agenda, which is not great for anyone.
No, and it's so funny you say that because, for example, like I think even with technology, there is that level of like broken trust, right? So, like for example, when we were on our CRM, like a year or two ago, when were debating switching, there was this realization that even if we could fix all of the problems, right? If we could fix everything that was going wrong in the tech stack, because we had kind of poorly implemented it, right? Like it's not against that technology. Like I think it was just too complex and it was technical debt adds up, right? And I think that
Yes.
system broke, right? And we lost trust in it. And we had this realization is like even if we could get everything fixed and make everything work, it's not going to be trusted by our employees and our staff anymore. And I think that was just something that was so valuable to learn is that like a failed implementation or like a failed partnership really does break that trust almost permanently.
Yes, that
It's
is
so fun.
definitely we think about that often just of how do you build trust quickly with a system because I think in this industry and it's not through anyone's fault, it's just like technology has been evolving so quickly in some ways and in a highly regulated space you can only adopt it so quickly.
Hmm.
And so there is like sometimes there's been promises made and trust broken when people have adopted new technologies, right? And
Yeah.
also because of the highly regulated nature of mortgage, there's a certain like CYA aspect of like everyone wants to make sure that they're double, triple checking everything done before them, so that they can be accountable to the work that is done, right? And so, like, something we think about a lot as a system of record is how do we make sure we're building trust with our users? How do we make sure that
Hmm.
there's this feedback loop of like the thing that you expected to happen? It not only happened on the back end, but we're going to surface that to you so that you know what happened, so that you can build this trust. Because otherwise, technology, and I'm sure you experience this too, like, can't actually really build the efficiencies that like you're expecting or promising if you don't have that trust because then humans will go back and just like double check it. And so what you thought like when you're like, hey, this will be automated or this will like get done by
Hmm.
the software. And so how do you like change that dynamic? How do you build trust quickly? One way we like think about that is like just having the software like tell the human what to do so that you don't have to necessarily train a behavior change, but the soft like
Hmm.
the actual workflows is encrypted in the software such that like you no longer have a software reading off of a spreadsheet or reading off of a manual. What do I do next? But the software just directly says, do this task, do this thing. And then
Hmm.
after that thing is done, it says, this is done. Like, here you go. It's completed. And so just building that trust. But to your point, it's like once like they doubt the software works, once you destroy trust in a relationship, it's so hard to like build it back. You're sort of digging yourself out of a hole.
You really are. And it's definitely something that we think a lot about as well. And it's the reason like we put more care into our onboarding process than I think just about anything else we do because those few like that first like 90 to 120 days with a client is so important because
Yes.
that's really when like they've said we believe in you, we're willing to trust you, now prove it, right? And I think that is something that is just so important and I think we've been talking a lot on this podcast and just in general, I think in the industry of the cost of failed implementations, because it is something that I think a lot of people are starting to talk about more. And I think it's so important as someone who does partnerships, what type of cooperation do you think partners have and have to do with their system of records, right? Or their point of sale or anything like that? And how do you think we can improve that as in the industry as a whole, right? Not just individual vendors.
Yeah, no, that's a great question and something I think about often. And in many ways, I say Mike gave me like the easiest job in the world when he asked me to do partnerships, which I had never done before because Vesta was really coming with a different approach to this whole conversation around what role the LOS plays in enabling partner cooperation or collaboration in the ecosystem. Whereas a lot of the incumbent LOSs have taken more of a wall garden approach, which maybe has benefits in
Mhm.
that you have like less vendors to manage. And so they've either built or bought kind of every part of the stack. We really believed
Mhm.
that Vesta's like if Vesta were to really achieve its goals, it was going to depend on cooperation by the ecosystem and sort of unlocking other technologies to be able to most fully sort of display whatever their capabilities are, and that a lot of that intelligence already existed. Um, and so I think that one way we can like better do it is that now that Vesta's building this open architecture and really looking at like how do we best work with one another, I think that there's a lot of things that probably other technology partners wanted to do in this space, whether it was like certain data fields that they would be able to build better workflows off of for themselves or be able to ingest that data automatically to like run like, hey, when this gets pulled in, automatically run fees or whatever it might be. And so I think
Mhm.
really trying to go a level deeper of like, what is your ideal experience? What would help your customers be most successful? And how do we work together to unlock that? Which means that there might
Mhm.
be like new functionality that we each have to build because sometimes it's like a tri-party dynamic. Like sometimes there's
Mhm.
like many, or even like sometimes four parties involved in like really unlocking the ideal experience. And how do we see that like by doing that and all investing in that, it ultimately not only better serves our mutual customer, but like moves the ecosystem more in the direction I think everyone wants to. Cause like the nice thing in mortgage is everyone's really cheering to create the
Mhm.
best like borrower experience we can, make it a more efficient process for them, make it a faster process for them. And I think
Yep.
if we like continue to really say like, hey, your win is my win, your success is my success, which ultimately I really deeply believe is true, we will be able to unlock better experiences for our lenders. And I think just like really having an eye on that, and prioritizing that, and like is really the way to move the ecosystem forward.
Yeah, I think that's so great. Well, as we wrap up here today, I get to ask my favorite question, which is here at Lodestar, we're big on celebrating people and things that inspire us. A Lodestar is a guiding light in the night sky that you navigate by. What is your personal or professional Lodestar? You can use either. I always like to say that. Like I give people the out.
No, I actually love that this is like what the Neighbor Guys company is like, and I think that you all are like very values oriented as a company, and I really like kind of love how you interwoven this into so many of the different things you all do. I was thinking a little bit about this question before our conversation because I know it's like on every single podcast you all do, and I think for me it's actually the same for personal and professional, which is there's so much out of our control in this world, which I think maybe is especially poignant right now as we are in a little bit of a down market, and little might be the understatement of this conversation, but it's just like one of those times, and we know that mortgage is really cyclical, but also being at an early stage startup or a small business, there's a lot of things out of your control on a daily basis. And I think it's really easy to get really bogged down in those things and sort of let that chaos really overtake your perspective. And it can feel almost like nihilistic. Like, what do we do when all these things like rates are out of our control? And I think all we can really do is the next right thing. And so I think about that often and say this to the team often is like, let's just do the next right thing. The next right thing with our product, the next right thing for our customers, next right thing for our partners, the next right thing for the team. And like in doing that, ultimately all the little things eventually add up and you can kind of see what is in your control and even sometimes tilt the universe a bit in your favor. But I think sometimes when you look too broadly, it can become a little bit overwhelming and you can lose focus of like what actually can be done today to move things forward. And so that's something, that I just think about often.
Yeah, I mean, you can't run a marathon without taking the first step, right? I think that's so important. Like,
yes. I definitely think there's also those things like I also I enjoy running, and like one reason I like it is I don't think I'm exceptionally good at it, but I think it's a very good analogy for life, which is just like get out there, get moving, do the hard thing, and like you will eventually make progress. Things will get better. It will be more fun. So
yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Monica, for taking the time to sit down and record with me today. Where can people find you if they want to connect with you?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Also, I would say that's probably the best place, Vesta.com. You can also reach out to us there if you'd like to partner with us. We're always open and excited to meet new partners. And I would love to chat with you more.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And thank you all so much for listening. We'll be back with you next week. And I can't wait to see you all soon.
Thanks so much, Alayna. I really enjoyed it.